Hey everybody! Welcome to the live stream. As you can see today, I have my dear friend Christian with me, and Christian is a unique guest because he's my only friend that I'm friends with IRL, that I did not meet through the show, who's been a guest on the show. How exciting is that? Christian and I actually met through friends and we hang out in real life. Do you even remember a time when those kind of things happened? So I'm very excited to have him here today with me. Before we get into the topic today, I wanted to thank my new patrons. Dustin, thank you, double thank you, because I know you contributed a one-time donation a few months ago, so thank you very much. Abra is a new patron, and Ahun, who I love you so much. I actually Googled how do you pronounce a German R to learn how to say your name. Thank you all very much. I appreciate it. Ahun, I missed you on the podcast before where I thanked everybody. Somehow I missed your donation, so I'm thanking you now. I also want to say, big announcement, the podcast version of my platform is now its own thing, and there's a episode out now. I didn't publish on it for about a month, but there's unique content over there, and it is now strictly an advice column podcast, which longtime listeners will know is amazing because I've wanted to do this forever. I love answering advice questions. So that's all set up and ready to go. The first question out is, how do I stop staring at my crush? And as usual, I take a very neurodivergent view of this question and dig into all kinds of things like brain chemistry and compulsion and things like that. So go check it out if you want to. So with that all out of the way, Christian, hi.
Hello.
Christian's my friend. That's the only thing on his resume.
Hi, friend.
Hi, friend.
It's a very short resume. Yeah.
Yeah, he is not as of this time at least a content creator. So yeah, he's just my friend. No socials to plug, nothing to promote, just here to have a good time.
Yep.
So I wanted to have Christian on the show because, as you all know, this show is focused on, having vulnerable conversations and talking about touchy-feely things. And Christian and I have been talking a lot about his journey into getting in touch with his feelings, setting boundaries with people, learning to express those feelings, because those are two different things, and his processing of masculinity and kind of what it means to him, and just looking at life, man, and working through some shit. So I was like, hey, this would be a really fun conversation for my podcast, and he was game to come on. So thank you for coming on, friend.
Thank you for having me.
Yes. So I think to set the scene, why don't you tell us about baby Christian, young Christian, teenage Christian? Just give us a sense of, how you've felt moving around the world, in terms of, masculinity and social anxiety and your feelings and anything else you think is relevant.
Yeah, definitely. So I mean, social anxiety, that one just jumps out at me immediately because I have always, like, not always, I guess recently I haven't had it as much, but for most of my life, I was massively socially anxious about everything and like very hyper aware and very concerned about how I fit into the world and people's perception of me and things like that. And that, obviously came from somewhere. And um, that's been with me since I was a little kid. Um, so I guess like kind of jumping back to when I was like really young, um, I was as far back as I can remember, I've always had that kind of like um, very self-aware and self-conscious about my position in the world and how my behaviors have affected other people, and was always like constantly trying to mitigate those type of things. Kind of didn't grow up really with a lot of good male role models. Really kind of depended on my mom and then my older sister to provide some guidance, and I guess sometimes, unfortunately, the social norms that kind of help develop myself. Um, so, in terms of things like the ideas and concepts of masculinity, like I never even thought about those probably till I was in my um, late 20s, early 30s. I was more just kind of like going through the motions and flying through life, and would come up in the background, but it was always just very low level understanding of the way that things work and the way that I developed and the things that affected me and made me me and how I coped with things. Oh, so it was definitely and always struggled with a lot of things,
Mm-hmm.
and we can always go into like those. We can always go to those things and how those worked, but there was always this constant struggle of like how to be myself and how to be acceptable, and then like how to be a good person and how to be a good guy, and um, and it wasn't until I really was just like almost like fed up with myself that I kind of was like, okay, I'm so third time, fourth time in therapy, it's gonna be the charm. Like I'm gonna put everything in here. It's gotta work this time. And that was probably as recently as like a year ago. Um,
Mm-hmm.
for, so
Yeah, and that lines up with, I think we started talking about this stuff within the last year, and I could sense a shift in you where you just seemed very focused and very committed to kind of doing this work, and I just felt like you were making like a really conscious effort even with me and Sarah to just talk to us more and about more things,
Hmm.
which was really great because we've been friends for, I was trying to remember, has it been my concept of time is a little a
Yeah, what
little
is time
squishy,
even more?
right? But I think it's
Uh,
like 5 years, 6 years,
yeah, I think that
something
sounds
like
about
that.
right. That
Yeah.
that seems crazy.
Yeah, I know,
Uh,
right? I realized that the other day and I was like, what?
yeah.
We were all such, well, it's funny because I wanted to say I was such a baby, but then I was like, no, I was still old back then. But you guys were babies.
I'm still
Um,
old too.
I know.
I'm always old.
I'm old and also very young at the same time.
Hmm.
Um, yeah, but it's interesting because we've been friends for so long, and I feel like we've always been pretty good friends. But it's definitely in the last year that I feel like the friendship has really, for me, like grown quite a bit and deepened quite a bit because of, I could tell how much of an effort you were making to be more open and just talk about other like things that I don't think you would have really been comfortable talking about, um, even just a couple years ago.
Hmm.
Um,
Yeah.
oh, go ahead.
Well,
I
just
was gonna
like
ask
that.
you a question.
I mean, just part of that I think is like it's like, I think for the first time, like I felt comfortable about talking to it because I had actually started doing the work to figure out myself. So like I
Mm-hmm.
couldn't even do it before. It wasn't possible for me because I
Yeah.
hadn't like put in that work. So that barrier of personal relationships, one of the things I've always struggled with and didn't like learn how to do, and that I see especially with so many guys, is like I help try to tear that down myself because it's just when you kind of see that it's not working, like all
Mm-hmm.
of a sudden it's like, okay, how do I get rid of this? And then you have to learn all about everything that is going on with you and society, and it's like it's
It's a whole thing.
yeah. If you're not
Yeah.
aware of it for most of your life, like you just kind of live on this easy mode, or it takes a bit of work to do it. It's so weird how you can kind of go through it and be so blind to it, but it's all around you and affects you. It's pretty wild.
Mm.
Uh,
Yeah, and that's what I thought was probably for me the most interesting part of this conversation is just the fact that on one hand, it's a privilege, right, to be able to kind of coast through and not know these things. But on the other hand, it does negatively impact you, and so there is that's what is frustrating to me about people who don't want to look at this sort of thing because it's like it's liberatory as
mhm.
much as it is anything else. Like it's going to make you a better person and it's going to free you up in a lot of ways. And yeah, sure, you're going to have to be aware of some stuff that you didn't have to be aware of before, but I do
Mhm.
feel like there's such a reward for doing that work that a lot of people don't. And I feel like especially a lot of men don't. I don't know, it's almost like they're terrified of even the possibility of that.
Mm.
Like, oh, deeper connections with people, they're like, oh no. I'm
Yeah,
scared.
that's so weird. Like I'm trying to go back into that mode of when like I kind of felt that. Um, and now that I know how it kind of feels to be more open, and I feel like I'm still like halfway in the process. I don't even know if I'm halfway. I always don't like to give myself the benefit of the doubt to give myself more room to grow. But uh, it's like why would you ever want to like not be more self-actualized and realize where you are in yourself?
Mm-hmm.
And I have a lot of friends that I talk to about like their dating experience, and especially when they're dating like uh, just like straight guys and everything that comes along with that.
Mm-hmm.
That like I'm like, oh, like I see what's going on with this person, and I understand where that person's coming from and why they're not realizing who they are, and it's insane how prevalent it is and how kind of destructive it is for like everybody involved. Um, I think there's so much uh, there's so much, not just like kind of like hurt or pain, but like this lack of intimacy and compassion that can come from people not um, not being able to bring like their emotional self or that to the table. And I see that so strongly with guys. I'm just like, oh, I just wish I could like shake the all those like barriers and scaffolding. And I think I've told you like this a many times. Like I always feel like it's like from like as a guy, like I am like so limited in my capacity to like express emotions, which was like almost like just taught into me.
Mm.
And it's not like it's s- something that it's like I want I don't want like any kind of like pity or anything for that, but it's just like it's sad. It's sad.
It is sad.
Yeah.
And it's
And like
very sad.
I want like that liberation because it represents like a huge population and a huge population of people that have a lot of pull in almost everything. So I just want to shake it free. Uh,
I
um,
love that. And I feel like I could feel that from you in years past, like this desire for more intimacy and more connection, but it just felt like I could feel that you didn't really know how to get there.
mm,
And something like that I struggle with a lot is I give people a lot of space and a lot of privacy. And I think like that can be a good thing, but it also, there's a lot of times in my relationships when I'm like, should I be pushing this person harder? Should I be a little bit more aggressive in certain ways? And you were one of those people that I was like, oh, I don't know. Like, should I be trying to push Christian harder? Should I just let him be where he is right now and just kind of like stay here and just be ready for whenever he's ready?
mm,
So that was always yeah, it was just something I thought about a lot because it is sad. It is sad to see, and I've had this experience with multiple men in my life. It's sad to see a guy who like clearly wants to connect more and just can't, just because either they don't know how or they're just too afraid or whatever it is, but it's really sad,
mm,
and especially when you care about someone, like you're a good person, and like you're my friend and you've been my friend since I met you, and so you're the kind of person like I want you to have the full range of beautiful human experiences that you can have. And yeah, it's hard to see someone you love struggling in that way and not really know like how do I help this person?
I also bet like massively frustrating to have to deal with it too. So,
I mean, I was just
yeah.
gonna stay on the sweet side of things, but yeah, I it's so funny that you mentioned like wanting to shake someone because that's how I felt with you sometimes, where I'm like, I love you, you idiot. Just tell me like, just tell me how you're feeling or talk to me about something.
Mm,
Because you would have times sometimes you would say like, oh, I'm having a hard time right now, and then me and Sarah would be like, oh, like, do you need something or like what's going on? And you would be like, no, just
yeah.
like backing away from it, and then I would have that feeling of like, oh, is this the time where I should push, or is this the time where I just let it be
Mm,
and then let him like come back?
mm,
And I always just let it be because that's kind of in my nature. But yeah, it's hard to know what dudes need sometimes
yeah.
when they're in that cycle.
Yeah, if somebody can't like express what they need to you, it's hard to know what
Mm-hmm.
they need. That's
Right. Amazing how that works, right?
yeah.
So you've mentioned before that there were like a lot of problems, and you said you could go into how those expressed themselves and developed. I would love to hear more about that.
Hmm.
And I also was just curious if there's like, do you just think it's kind of systemic toxic masculinity that gave you these issues around connecting to your feelings and expressing them, or do you think there are other factors at play as well?
Definitely other factors. Like, everybody kind of grows up in a unique way that causes them to have certain behavioral characteristics. To kind of combine those two questions together, like something that I learned from when I was a kid was to avoid anger,
Mm,
which created like a lot of appeasement, repression of my own personal desires because I didn't want to like get into arguments or upset other people. So I learned how to kind of push that down. And then at the same time, like I'm also learning a lot about how I should behave as a person, how I should date, how I should approach relationships, like what does it mean to be successful as a guy.
mm,
I was, I think, very impressionable when I was a kid in terms of like pop media and things like that. Um,
me
I
too.
I dated a girl once, and I would always like recite commercial jingles from when I was a kid, and she's like, "Well, how do you know so many jingles? Like, that's
That is such
wild."
a Christian thing. I can so picture that.
She's like, "I don't know. Like, I just remember the whole like whatchamacallit commercial from 1994." Um,
Whatchamacallits.
yeah,
Shit,
uh,
yeah.
but but yeah, so I think I was just like I watched all these shows when I was a kid, and just the media gave me a lot of perception about our gave me the perception of how I should be as a person a lot of times. And I think especially because like I didn't have like a good male role model. My mother was a single working mother. I did have a stepdad for a while, but that like more made things worse than better. um, and I just didn't have a lot of context about like how I should like be a happier, more well-rounded person. Um, and I think mostly what I got from my parenting is like how to be like kind and good and things like that, but not
Mm,
like there was no like this thing that you're learning over here that's not good. There was not a lot of like check in with that, I think, as I got older. So I really was very impressed like society had a huge imprint on me. Um, I was not aware of it. I was not very self-conscious about that kind of thing. I was more self-conscious about like how I fit in, not like what was affecting me.
mm.
So I just like soaked up all those social juices about how to be a guy.
Ew.
I don't know how better to put it. Okay, I'll use better analogies next time.
I love it. I just
Uh,
want to point out for the record that that's the kind of thing, if I said it, you would be like, ew, don't say that.
no, you have your own things that get
I'm just
me.
saying it's in the same family of words,
Mm,
sir.
I don't mind liquidy things.
Ew. Christian hates the word beefy,
I
so
hate the word beefy.
I say it all the time. And yeah, I don't like anything juicy.
No.
Anyway, um, did you have a, because you mentioned like you didn't know how to be like happy. Did you have a sense that you weren't happy? Do you know what I mean? Or
Mm.
did it feel like something was missing, or just kind of what was your experience with that side of things?
Yeah, my entire life. I always felt like there was like a defect or I was unhappy or
Mm.
like how do other
Mm.
people like how are other people? I know. Like how do I get this happiness that I see in other people? I was always like struggling, struggling for that. Um, and I think like a lot of times, you put on a kind of a mask so you don't appear like you're like that.
Yeah.
Especially when I'm taught to be like confident. I'm supposed to be like confident and know what I'm doing and what's going on. It's like, oh, just put on a couple masks at the same time in order to like not display that vulnerability that like I'm not happy and I don't know what I'm doing. And I don't have like the guidance or I don't know what tools I need to get to where I want to go. So that was like probably a huge part of my life. I would say, I mean, up until the last couple year or so, I mean, it's gotten instrumentally better this past year. Um, but it was always that was always there. Which is kind of funny too because I've never seen the documentary. I think it was called like That Mask You Wear.
Hmm.
I've never seen
You
it.
should watch it.
I know. Just
We can watch it together and then talk about it.
uh, but that even that title just like it stuck with me
Yeah.
really really well. Um, I think it just becomes like I just had no mechanism to make myself aware of like where I was in society. Like whether that's because I'm in this position where I just have a lot of advantage and privilege because of like how I was born. Um, but I just never was never had that kind of mechanism to be like, hey, this is how you fit into things. And um, like internally I had to struggle with things because of my childhood, but like externally I never had to struggle with anything. And with nobody
Mm,
to say like, hey, look at all these things that you didn't have to do. Like other people have to deal with this. I just never got that.
yeah.
So which is interesting. Oh,
Yeah, and I'm glad that you can talk about that because I think conversations about privilege and experience are so touchy because I do think a lot of people, men, white people, cis people, what have you, have had your experience where they may have really felt this kind of like pain or loneliness or, that something was missing their whole life and have struggled with that, but also have had a lot of things be easy at the same time.
mhm,
And for a lot of people, that internal struggle takes priority over like seeing and acknowledging the things that were easy because then it feels like it's invalidating their experience. And I think it doesn't need to, right? Like both can be true. And I think we do need to, like, I've done a lot of work on my platforms to talk about, I do think we need to talk about privilege in a different way. I think the way we talk about it is just unnecessarily aggressive because it's not supposed to erase your lived experience. It's just supposed to explain your lived experience, and
mhm,
it's one part of how you've moved about the world. And yeah, I just think so many spaces privilege has become this weapon, and it's become this way to invalidate. And I think we do need to acknowledge that a lot of people. I mean, we're living in a system. The whole system is really violent against things like deep interpersonal connection. So a lot of us, no matter how much privilege we may have, feel that. We walk around and we feel like I just don't feel the way I thought I was supposed to feel. And
mm,
I don't, I also love that you brought up like you didn't even know where to start. And I think that's a lot of people too. Like, what do you do? Go to a therapist and be like, I don't know. I just, something feels off,
yeah.
right? And I mean, you can. And hopefully that therapist is, skilled enough to help you with that. But it's hard to know like where to go and where to start,
Mhm,
especially when you do on the outside have so many privileges, because
yeah.
then you think like, well, why do I even struggle? Like, what is even my problem?
Yeah. And I think it's a challenge too because like the first time I was really engaged about um really engaged about like I guess just privilege in general. My first reaction, and even as somebody who's always been like, oh, he's such a nice guy his whole life, like my first reaction was like defense mode.
Mm,
It's like to just be like wait a minute, like how is this how does this relate to me? And like it's just very much about that in me position, especially like I've
mm-hmm.
just never really had to never had to deal with that much. I mean, a couple times in my life because I'm brown, but being super tall guy, I just haven't had a lot. But like s- it 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 takes a while, I think, especially when you don't ever have to think about anything in that sphere to overcome it because if somebody like pokes in like an idea of like, hey, like you need to like think about this because of this, whether they say it and like an however they say it,
Mm-hmm.
like you don't have the context around that. So it's like you just keep on having to get more of those pieces, and it keeps on having to build up until you have enough context to be like, oh, I see what's going on here. Like, I understand it now. Whereas
Yeah.
if you've kind of grown up your entire life in that disadvantaged position in society, then you had the context the entire time.
Hmm.
And so I think that's why like I see so much defensiveness around it and why I was defensive myself. And I knew like I was when I was being defensive, I was like, I know that like this is stupid and I'm wrong and I should like be like not like this. But like on the emotional level, like it was just like a natural response. And I'd have like conversations and arguments in my head, but then when it actually come time to like talking to somebody or confronting somebody about it, I usually would like tone it down a little bit. But
Hmm.
the emotional reaction is like instantly very defensive, especially initially, which is
Yeah.
yeah.
And that's why, too, I think, it's obviously on the responsibility is obviously heavy on the person who has privilege to like understand their privilege and work through some of those defense mechanisms. But again, I just think that also proves why the way, because I've been saying lately, the way, and I'm not the only person to say it, but like the way that we talk to other people should be enticing in a lot of ways. Like
Hmm.
even when you're trying to explain privilege, I think there's ways that you can explain to people why they feel the way they do that can reduce that defensiveness and give
Hmm.
some of that context sooner. Because
Hmm.
you're right, if you're just told, like, hey, like, this is wrong and like stop doing it. I just feel that so much of activism is like trying to get other people to just memorize behavior and scripts.
Hmm.
Right?
Yeah.
But it's not about actually like changing their worldview and bringing like this deep fundamental understanding of how things work in a way that can then empower them
Hmm.
at the same time as, check their behavior. Um, so I think what you talk about, like not having the context, is just really super valid because we don't a lot of times give people context. We just say, "Hey, that's blank ist. Don't
Hmm.
say that or don't do that." And sure, people should stop harmful behaviors, but like we can also take the time to give some more of that context. I think especially if you're an ally, that in my view is like an ally's job is to have the patience and the time to maybe take, explain more of the context and do work that can leave someone with like somewhere to go, right?
Hmm.
Like you were saying, like, I didn't know where to go. I didn't know where to start or who to ask or what to ask. Like if we do this work the right way, I think we can put someone on a path that feels a little, it's scary and they'll probably feel defensive, but they'll also be like, wow, I maybe actually have something to look into now.
Yeah. Yeah. I think I've mentioned to you at various points that one of my favorite four-letter words is tact. Um,
Yeah.
and I just like that means different things to different people. I can for myself, um, like I've always struggled with anger. I don't like aggression. I didn't like conflict, and
Mm-hmm.
so if something aggressive was thrown at me, my instant response was to shut down. And that's me as an individual. Some other people, the only way that might get through them is a little bit of aggressiveness.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like that fact that we're still like humans at the end of the day, and you have to approach people at different in different ways in order to get the message across. Um, like sometimes you just have to like learn about how does this person receive information, and then my end goal is like how can I um, plant the seeds of change in this person based on who they are. And for me, it's one way, and for like another guy or somebody else, it's a completely different way. You can't just like, I mean, you do have to. You can't like go to every single person and be like, "What's this person like? I gotta figure them out." You die before you got to like the 100th person because it takes so much time. So we all have our channels of doing it. But I just think like I'm not when people don't change because of something, I'm usually not surprised. I'm like, okay, like, well, how does this person receive information and how have they not gotten it yet? And what are the
Mm-hmm.
barriers to option? Like actually thinking about the individual in that scenario. Um, and I don't think I was changed until like I was actually like dating somebody who taught me those things. Like another person like taught me how to do that and spent the time with me. And I don't
Hmm.
know if I'd be here if it wasn't for that person. So, even though it's like my responsibility to change, like I couldn't have done it by myself, and I couldn't have done it without people telling me what to do, even if I got defensive at the beginning. Like I needed other people.
Aw.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And I talk about that a lot too. Like there's stuff, maybe not necessarily around like privilege or whatever, but there's just things that I have that I want to work through, and I know that I can't fully work through them by myself.
Hmm.
I really do need other people to fully do that work, you know, and I think that's really important to talk about because so much of the rhetoric that we hear is very individualized. And I understand why. Like I understand where a lot of this stuff comes from, and I think a lot of it comes from exhaustion and censorship
Hmm.
and right not being heard and understood. And so I get it, but at the end of the day, like to me it's a very neoliberal solution because any radical leftist is looking towards a future that is extremely community oriented. And so to me, it's like, well, we have work to do right now that is actually really community oriented. It's not as individualized as we say that it is. It is much more about, I think the most powerful thing that we can all do, all of us, is just deeply connect with other people,
Hmm.
you know? So I
Yep.
think, and when you want to deeply connect with other people, you have to make some room and space for conflict and frustration. And another reason I wanted to talk to you today is because I think you're such a good use case too of how I often tell other activists, like, you have to take a very long view with people. Everyone wants to boil stuff down to one conversation that's going to change this person's trajectory. And that can happen
Mm.
sometimes. But really, more of what it is being in community with people for years,
Hmm.
you know?
Yeah.
To really look at someone and be like, I'm going to be in community with you for the rest of our lives or for the foreseeable future, and I'm going to allow you to make progress
Hmm.
in that way versus like I'm at a table at a fair and like I have 30 seconds to get you to change your mind about XYZ, you know?
Mm. Yeah, the most you can get from that 30 seconds is just like planting an idea into somebody's head. That
Right,
idea has to
which
take
is
hold.
valuable,
No.
but it's not, to me, from what I've seen, it's not the only work. And I would argue it's not the most important work
Mm.
either. I think this growth over time and this forming really strong bonds and allowing people the space to like really come into their own and grow is it's just a lot more, what's the word I'm looking for, durable.
Mm.
It's a lot more durable, you know,
Yep.
because I have so much work I've done, you know, I've tabled for vegan stuff, and I have turned so many people vegan in my life, you know, through various ways. And it doesn't always take, you know what I mean? Like you may inspire someone in that 30 seconds or over even the course of a few days, but you're not there with them in their life.
Hmm.
And they're going to go back to their carnist, you know, world where they don't have someone inspiring them constantly and like working with them constantly. And I just think everything is like that, you
Yep.
know, everything is like we need to actually facilitate a new way of living together versus like, I'm just going to say one thing, roast you on social media or whatever it is, and then move on.
Yep.
Yeah.
I always like I love an analogy that people are like quilts, and that like
Oh,
you can like take things out of the quilt or add things to the quilt. By the time we reach like a certain age, like we have a massive quilt, um, and in order to like make change, like you can't just like pull on a thread like this is a bad thing and pull on that thread because that's just destructive and it's going to ruin that. Like you have to like take little patches out and put new patches in, and it's a very slow, meticulous process to like change the quilt and expand the quilt or take things out of it. And it's not just a like grab it and rip this thing and hope that it turns out okay.
Yeah.
So I've always thought about myself like that. You can't just pull the thread. You have to approach it smartly and wisely.
Hey man, don't pull my thread, all right?
Don't pull my thread, bro.
Hey bro, bro, you pulling my thread, bro? Um, oh, I had a thought and I lost it.
I hope you find it.
It'll come back to me. Anyway, we've had some good questions come in too. So Susie says, loving this conversation. I'm currently reading Whipping Girl by Julia Serrano, and she talks about the need to empower femininity as a way to achieve gender equity. I'd be curious to hear Christian's thoughts about naming some of the behaviors he wants to adopt as feminine as a way to give permission for cishet men to experience femininity. Do you have
That's
any thoughts
interesting.
about that, sir?
Yeah, like so I've always struggled with masculinity and femininity as terms, and
Me
why
too.
we even have like that separation. Um, and I, I think it can be like I don't know how much of it is like what we learn or what's inside of us, but like I actually don't like to create that divide between those two things because I just want access to all the things, and I want everybody to have access to all the things. Um, I feel there's a lot of times that like, you know, I wanted to do things that were not considered that were considered feminine, and I might have felt like uncomfortable doing it when I was younger. And I definitely still do nowadays because it just got baked into me. But I just want to be able to do those things and not think that they're not available to me at all. So I guess I don't have like a strong opinion about that because my viewpoint might be a little bit different. Oh.
Yeah, and it's an interesting thing because I do see femininity as a counter to, girl, you're not even ready. I could go into a whole gender
Hmm.
rampage right now. So let me see if I can reel it in. Yeah, I have mixed feelings about things like that as well, just because for me as like an gender queer person, to me, I kind of see femininity existing to be a counter to masculinity, and
Hmm.
masculinity existing to be a power structure, if that makes sense.
Hmm.
So to me, it's kind of like whiteness existing, right? Like
Hmm.
we only created whiteness so that there could be not white people that we
Hmm.
could exploit. Um, Tasha's like, oh, we ready, girl. Go for it. So to me, I do understand. It's kind of how I feel about pronouns as well. Like, I think pronouns can be really empowering because we have cis sexism, but I think true liberation would be not needing to have pronouns.
Yes. Yep.
So that's kind
Yeah.
of how I feel about this as well. Is like I can see in the interim that it may be empowering and useful for maybe men to adopt things and call them out as feminine and do them with pride. But in my eyes, the future I'm moving towards is where those differentiations don't even exist. Those categories don't even exist.
Yep. Yep. And I think that's I'm on the exact same page there. Like there has to be that interim step, of course,
Mm-hmm.
or many interim steps. Um,
Yeah, so
but
many.
yeah, I would love that divide to not exist at all. Like I guess I'd love to see everybody being able to do everything uh, all the time. I actually feel like really like I haven't been able to do the majority of things that I wanted to because of like the way that the societal structure is set up. Um, and I think I don't know. Hmm. like I think the more that I've kind of been opening myself up, the more I realize that there's like most of the stuff as a guy, like I don't like it that much, the things that I've gotten. And there's a lot of times where I'm like, oh, I wish I had got like had all these things kind of come in from that I see that um my my female friends that I grew up with had access to. And that's not to say like I don't appreciate everything that's been given to me or anything like that,
Mm.
but I just feel like it's like why can this other person not have everything that I had and I couldn't have what they had because of some rules? And I guess is the question like what are some of those things that like could be like interchanged, or so the
Let
question isn't
me
up anymore?
let me look back.
So I
I
think.
mean, yeah, it would
Mhm.
be interesting because I don't know that you've necessarily named the behaviors that you're working towards. I think some of them have maybe come out through the conversation, but it would be interesting to hear, like what you just said, the stuff that you felt you didn't have access to.
Hmm.
Like, what are those things, you know? But yeah, just curious about if you would name those behaviors as like feminine
Hmm.
to decrease stigma for cishet men exhibiting feminine behavior.
Yeah, I think there is a lot of things that I would say like I like these behaviors that are more feminine, and I think they're better, and they're like uh, uh they're they're in a lot of ways more freeing. I feel
Mm-hmm.
like a lot of times when I adopt certain behaviors that would have been considered more traditionally feminine, I've like unlocked myself more,
Oh,
which
I
is
love
really
that.
nice.
That is
Yeah.
really nice.
So,
Like what specifically do you think? What have you found like freeing?
I mean, the really broad one would be like being able to share emotions, and not have them stifled and kind of um, just getting like yeah, I feel you, man. Like those kind of
Totally,
really,
bro.
yeah, exactly. Like
Yeah.
there's not a lot there. There's not a lot of intimacy there. There's a lot of like kinship and brotherhood, and somebody is always going to have your back, and being away from somebody for 10 years and you still know like that happens. But in terms of like wanting to establish a deep meaningful relationship utilizing the emotions that I have, like that's kind of something that's not really allowed
Mm,
on a deep level. Um, it's always like it's it's like there's this nice crust around it, and like everybody knows it's there, but we just kind of like hang out with each other and never let that um,
mm.
that intimacy kind of form with each other. Um, and kind of like getting access more to that. And you kind of were mentioning this too, how like within the friend group with you, myself, and Sarah, like it's been only the past year or so that I've really been able to like share what's been going on with me, and not just been kind of like an anxious mess and then kind of dealing it with myself, and then suddenly I'm
Right.
like, oh, he's
And
back,
we're both
he's
worried about you, but
yeah.
we don't know what to do about it.
Um, so like, and that's not even just like the negative, but it's like the positive, like being ecstatic and super happy about something.
Mm,
It's a lot of times like you have to kind of filter that down, like, oh, look at this cool thing that I found. Like, I want to be like really happy and animated and pumped up and jazzed about it because that's how I feel. And like, I get to do those things now, and I've learned to do those things mostly from the women that I'm around.
mm.
And I think I tend to kind of gear towards that femininity because it just feels better. I still like struggle with guy relationships sometimes because they feel so boring.
I've always wondered that, honestly. I'm like, dude, relationships seem so boring. Like,
So
how?
boring. You get to do cool activities together,
That's true.
but that's the depth sometimes that it is. And it's
Right.
like, oh gosh. Oh.
I just think about like me and my female friends largely, and like, yeah, we're just constantly just deeply talking about stuff, and like being silly and I don't know. It's just, yeah, it's just weird to look at like a dude relationship and be like, how is that just not boring you to tears, you
Mm,
know?
it is on the inside.
Yeah. Um, I haven't asked you this in real life, but do you have any dudes right now that you feel like you have been able to practice some of this stuff with? Like, have you been able to deepen any of your male relationships?
Um, it's like when I try to do stuff like that, I usually get a little bit back, but it's not full reciprocation.
Hmm. Do you feel
So
like you've made any of them uncomfortable?
yes,
Mm,
yeah,
yeah.
absolutely. Um, and you can feel it like that, like reeling back
Mm,
from it. Um, at the same time, I almost feel like too, there's like I can't imagine that there's not a longing for like those type of like that type of intimacy. Um, I feel like I always knew somewhere within myself that that was like something I desired, but I
hmm.
just didn't know like what it was about, how to get it, how to have access to it. Um, and I think I can't imagine that there's anybody who doesn't crave that. Um, I feel like a lot of times, and I'm speaking from a very like like hetero cis kind of way here, but there's always I feel like there's a lot of guys who get into relationships and that becomes like their one person that they can
Hmm.
let their guard down with. And then
Yep.
of course the other person has to like take the full brunt of that. And it's
Yes.
not always healthy either.
Yes. I have been that person many times.
Yeah. I have been the person unfortunately who has done that to other people many times.
Mhm.
And it got so bad for myself that I realized that like I was hurting other people and I needed to change myself.
Mm.
Um, so that's like one of the things that inspired like my recent spat with seeing a therapist and really working on myself is because I've been that person. I've gone down that path for most of my life, and so when other people talk to me about like their significant other and they're being like that, I'm like, I know what this person, usually a guy, is. I know what's going on inside of this person, and it's
Mm.
not a lot of self-actualization and not realizing where like what's going on and dealing with their stuff. So,
Yeah. Yeah, I wondered too, if you felt this way. I feel like with a lot of my partners, there for me, there was this like impossible task of being, so I'm wondering if you'll relate to like or validate what I'm thinking. Um, there seemed to be this impossible task for me to be the only person that this person could be soft or open with at all, but then also this active resistance to being soft or open.
mhm,
So it was this constant push pull all the time where it was like one day this person might like be crying and telling me these like deep feelings, and then the next day it's like just suddenly this wall would be up and I could tell that they were like embarrassed or felt overly exposed, and it just felt like I could never feel comfortable like
mhm.
where we were at emotionally because they were in so much conflict. So
Yeah.
I don't know if you relate to that at all, but I just always sensed that, and it was always really damaging to me because it's like you're not even allowing me to show up every day in the same way. Like I don't know who I'm going to be talking to minute or how I'm supposed to be. And on one moment, it's like great and you're being soft and you're opening up and I need to be supportive in that way. And then the next moment, I'm getting punished for trying to be supportive in that way because you're
Hmm.
having a moment of resistance.
Yep. No, definitely, definitely, absolutely. Um, like I can definitely validate what you're saying, and if I ever can't, like, just slap me because I can.
Will
I
do.
always can. But yeah, I've and I have an analogy for that in my head, of course, as well, is that
Do tell.
it's a river versus a dammed river, and I feel like a lot
Mm,
of times it's like I you let all these emotions out suddenly, and then you build the dam back up until it starts
yeah.
breaking again, then you let it out, rather than just having this
Dude,
more
that's
consistently
deep.
flowing river. Um, so
Killing it
I
with the analogies today, friend.
it's really our imagery makes things easy to explain. But yeah, I've done that myself. I know what that feels like, and I think I still fight with that like
Hmm.
constantly. Like
I think you do a
I
little
more
bit.
have to like try to be consistent with my feelings and constantly check in with myself that I'm not holding back. But then having not practiced it for a long time, constantly check that I'm not being overbearing because I feel like I'm constantly being overbearing with like the
Oh,
slightest bit of like emotional
yeah.
release. So
I
that
actually really relate to that from my like abusive childhood. Is I got similar messages that my feelings were too much or that they were annoying and they were something that needed to be controlled. So like I can relate to that of like it's especially having people around you who just so badly want you to open up,
mm,
but you open up even a little bit and you feel like you're just being this horrible burden or this like
mm,
overbearing monster, and it's just you have no internal compass
mm,
for what's like a normal amount for me to be like. For me especially, it's like asking for help. I feel like if I ask for anything, it's like the biggest favor, and it's like so what's the word I'm looking for? Like I'm just being like selfish and irresponsible, no matter
mm,
how small the favor might be, because I just have no compass. I have no like internal barometer for okay, what's like a normal friend favor? What is like
mm.
a normal thing that people ask each other to do?
Yep.
And yeah, I feel that way too with like like especially when I'm having emotions that are like really serious. I it's very hard for me to know how much of that I can let out to someone else without being too much.
Hmm. Yeah, it's really hard to measure those things. I imagine it's like it can be it's very vulnerable.
Yeah,
And
super vulnerable.
if you're kind of have been punished at any point in your life for being vulnerable, that's really hard to get a measure
Hmm.
for that.
Yeah.
Um,
And I mean,
yeah,
that's men, right? Like, in a nutshell, I don't
yeah,
think there's many dudes who haven't in some way been punished for being vulnerable.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. I mean, doesn't even have to be words. It's just like a climate
Hmm.
and an atmosphere.
Yep.
Um, I know like the expression like "man up" is like a very common like very destructive kind of expression. Um, but like it's just even like watching older people than yourself and how they behave and just picking up on those behaviors and like weaving that into your own personality. It's like until like that culture changes around what it means to be a guy, not just in the words that we use, um, but the way that we're shown how to be,
Mm.
then it can't change. Um, because like my mom used like all the best words. Like she was amazing with those type of things. Like teaching me respect and kindness and honesty and how to be like good with people. Um, but I still learned like how to be part of the boys club from school and television and all those type of things. So I really need to. It's like it's facilitating that kind of change. And honestly, like not just it's like everybody. Like I can't tell you how many dating profiles I've had to wanted to comment on that are like say something like I'm looking for like a real man who does this, and I'm like stop being like using that term, like every so like everybody does it. We're all part of the same engine,
Mm.
and um, it kind of creates those barriers in the same way when like people have expectations on what it means to be like X for anything, any like gender, anything.
Hmm.
And it's the same. I think it has that same negative impact on somebody like me, and really has like stifled me a lot as an individual. Um, But it's been great to like tear that down a little bit.
Yay.
Uh,
Well, and I've always thought that was very intriguing about you because you are this like extremely tall, strapping young man, but you do have this way of moving that's very gentle, and I noticed that it's funny because a lot of my tall guy friends, well, I'm just drawn to people who have like different energy anyway. Like I don't like a bro. I think we all know that. Um, but it's just really sweet to me, like how often I see you're like extremely aware of your height and you're trying to do things to make other people more comfortable, or you always talk in this very like soft way, to be like, oh, I'm not going to have this like loud booming voice at people. I want to like be more. So it's just interesting that you were able to internalize so many soft and like considerate mannerisms and behaviors, and you are very kind. Like that was one of the first things I noticed about you is you're just a very genuinely like kind person, and still at the same time have all of this toxic masculinity stuff at play as well.
mhm.
And I think for you, because you are tall and like very masculine looking, you probably have gotten away with it in a way. Like I think you can kind of mask and navigate male spaces, but I think about people who don't look that way and how hard it would be for them. And like in a way, it's nice that you've been able to be yourself in that sense and
Mhm.
get through the world. But I also know that you've talked about feeling uncomfortable around other men or in masculine spaces. And I
Mhm.
wonder if that's like a big part of it too, is like you don't really move through the world in like this uber masculine way.
Hmm. Yeah, I've never liked that. It's always made me very uncomfortable.
Yeah.
Um, it doesn't seem fun or pleasant. Uh, oh, and it's never been intentional, which is kind of like an interesting thing.
Hmm.
Like I've never like intentionally tried not to. mm, Right now, I'm fact checking in my head if that's true or not. I think it started out very unintentional. I was just like, I don't. I look at that kind of masculinity, and it just doesn't. I don't have the appetite for it.
Mm.
Um, and sometimes I wonder if a lot of those type of things just come from like I know a lot of guys that do, and if it comes from just like an appetite of how you were raised and what you were raised around. Since I was mainly raised with like my mom and my older sister, and they were kind of like my guidance of how to get through life at the very family level. I think I just probably picked up a lot on their energy and the way that they navigated and their value systems and things like that.
Mm.
No,
Yeah.
no. It's
Let Go ahead.
Well, I was just gonna say it's weird that you were talking about like like with my height and things like that because like I don't sit around and be like I'm 6'4" all the time. Like I never notice it.
I can't
Uh,
imagine I would. I would just be like, I'm 6 fucking 4.
yeah, it wasn't until like recently that I really had my first experience of like physical discomfort. And because of all the
Mm,
stuff that's happened over, especially the past like 6 months or so, walking down the street and seeing somebody and actually feeling uncomfortable and feeling unsafe. And
really?
yeah, and it's really interesting because it's like I always knew like I empathized with that feeling.
Hmm.
Um, but I felt like for the first time I had like a taste of how that actually feels.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, I kind of get it now. I get it more now.
Yeah.
Um,
Well, and that is honestly a very real consequence, if you will, of, as Susie brought up, adopting these behaviors and these and just a general worldview that's considered at least to be more feminine,
mm,
is that no matter who you are, at some point you're going to find yourself in a space where you probably suddenly don't feel safe,
mhm.
you know? So
And
I'm not
I
totally
always,
surprised.
yeah, I mean, I always like empathized with it, but it's weird. It's a very different thing to like
Yeah.
understand it and to feel
Yeah.
it, to actually live it. Um,
100%.
And like
It
I
might sound weird, but that's how I felt the first time I cut my hair really short,
mm,
where I was like, oh, I could be interpreted as queer now. And
mm,
I felt like naked. And I was like, oh, this is how like queer people feel, you
mm.
know? Like, even though I am queer, I don't know, I put that in quotes, I am queer. Um, although I was still kind of questioning at the time, so I think that played into it. But yeah, like having my head shaved or buzzed or like cutting my hair super short, it just was this, it was this new level of vulnerability that I intellectually understood, but like feeling it for the first time was like, whoa, like a
Yeah.
very different experience. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting how like the difference between being able to empathize and being able to feel directly, it's
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
can really
Yeah.
change the way you act and behave and
It
empathize
certainly
stronger.
does. Yeah, it certainly does. Well, and that's I think that is the real challenge is, obviously there's a huge hurdle to get people to do the work and kind of view things in a different way, but to help people and support people as they're actually experiencing the consequences of truly changing themselves is
Mm,
like, I feel like nobody talks about that ever. Like,
mm,
I really do. I feel like no one talks about how, the second that you truly, truly align yourself with something, you get to some extent some level of the violence of that thing as
mm-hmm.
well. And, obviously, the more of us that do it, then the safer it gets. And like, that's what we need to do. But I just think I used to talk about this even with veganism. Like, it's silly, but it's like you're suddenly going to have all of the relationships in your life are going to be challenged by this change,
Yep.
right? And you're going to have issues with things like traveling and, going out to eat and the stuff that you didn't even have to think about before.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so it doesn't mean that people shouldn't care about animal liberation, but we also, to me, it felt a little irresponsible to just be like, just do it, just change your life. And like, yet no one is really truly like preparing people for, you might like lose relationships that you've had for your whole life.
Yep.
And I think the work you're doing too is similar. I think you've built up such a good network of like women and people who support you that I think largely you'll be okay. But I mean, it's going to challenge how you feel in the world, and it's going to challenge some of the relationships you have.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Like I think the fear of being like isolated from your community is probably stronger than a lot
Mm,
of times our need to like change
yeah,
and better ourselves. Oh, that feeling of
yeah.
like alone and you're by yourself and nobody understands you is like a terrible thing that creates so much fear in us from change. So, I feel lucky that I've had people like you and like Sarah and stuff in my life to always like as I've kind of gone through my own work, like I know you guys are always there, which has been
Hmm.
wonderful. And I read stories about people who like haven't had that and it's like heartbreaking. It's like
Yeah,
losing family and friend groups and like that's it's so much.
yeah.
Well,
Because I've known guys, I mean, who even the women that they dated wouldn't be okay with this kind of thing.
hmm,
It's like those I want a real man kind of women. Yeah, right. Or like, why are you talking about your feelings? you know?
yeah,
So yeah, I think it's just something. It doesn't mean people shouldn't do the work, but it's just something that I think, again, as I think about the kind of content I want to put out to the world to try to like make the world better, I think it's something we have to make a lot of room and space for. Is that there are people who are literally going to lose every connection they have right now
hmm,
in trying to be this other thing, and like, how do we support that?
yeah, yeah. It's like it's for me. That's just goes kind of goes back to like the tact thing. And it's like when you go to when you're speaking with somebody and you're like you want them to change or it's like you want them to change, but if they're not, it's like okay, like why? What's going on? What are
Hmm.
the connections in their lives that are preventing them from doing this? And sometimes like when you look at those connections and things, it's like it's kind of like can be a lot of like sadness there sometimes, or like a
Mm.
lot of just social like construct, or there's like so many things. And um, looking, it's then all of a sudden you start seeing them as the person that they are, and it's very interesting
Mhm.
to look at them that
Mhm.
way, rather than like this person who's just resistant to change. It's like, oh, it's a this person is the most like important part of that. um,
Yeah. Yeah. Tasha asked, back when you were talking about getting really defensive and having that be, how you responded to things, she says, OMG, same. I'm curious, how do you deal with the shutdown? Because for me, I still don't know how to fight past it.
hmm.
So do you have any tips, or just like how did you kind of build that muscle? I know it's something that's still in progress, but like how did you take those first steps to be like, okay, I react defensively, but like how do I push past that to have a different reaction?
Yeah. I think you use the term muscle, and I think that's a great analogy because like you have to just build it. I think the more often you do it, the more in practice you get with doing it, kind of controlling how I reacted to things, and knowing that when I reacted things with a strong emotion that I didn't like and I didn't agree with that emotion, that I could change that behavior. So I guess for me, it was like the acknowledgement of this is not how I want to react, and then just practicing reacting
Mm.
the way I wanted to. It's really just building that muscle, I think. At least that's
I
what it
know
was
for
for me.
my for myself, part of it too is giving myself permission to come back and react better later.
Mm,
In terms of like, hey, maybe I didn't, maybe I was defensive, and maybe I didn't react in a way that made me proud or happy with myself. But I can go back to that person and say, hey, the way I acted before, I didn't like that. Can we do a take two? Or, now that I've had time to think. I think it's hard. I think it's hard. I think it's especially hard for men to kind of like revisit things
mm,
and admit that they were wrong, And I think for people in general, I don't know, I feel like there's just so much rhetoric around sort of like again for media, because I feel like I was heavily impacted by media as well, so I'm really glad you brought that up. And I think if you look at conflict in media, it's always so black and white, right? It's like the thing happened and then it like happened, and we hardly ever get, you may get resolution later, but we hardly ever get people just genuinely talking through things or
mm,
coming back to be like, the next day, just like, hey, friend, I know we talked about something last night and I got defensive, but I'm, trying to work through that. And like, I'm here and I'm listening. And like, here's a better reaction.
mm,
I just think making space to come back to stuff later is really powerful. And there's just, I guess what I'm saying is I feel like there's so much emphasis put on like what happens in the moment
mm.
versus again realizing I'm in a relationship with this person, like we can come back and visit this. It doesn't
Yep.
have to just be what happened in the moment.
Yeah, I think that's great. I love that.
Yeah.
Um,
And then
I,
eventually in the moment gets better, right?
yes.
Yeah, but
I think one thing
um
too I'd like to add on to that is I
yes.
think a lot of people struggle with like forgiving themselves for their own behavior and the way they act
Mhm.
when they don't like it. So I know a lot of times, I think I see this in a lot of guys too that I know, that if you have trouble forgiving yourself for something you did that you don't like, then a lot of times you just avoid trying to rectify it or those situations in general. And so
Yes.
then you become like very like avoidant of the situation. So I think one of the things that I kind of learned how to do was like not to be so critical and harsh on myself and like forgive myself. And that's really allowed me to engage in the conversations easier. And like you just said, it's allowed me to like teach myself how to react better in the situations. I cannot praise being able to forgive yourself and it's instrumental to like improving how you are.
I love that. Yeah, I think shame and embarrassment and self-loathing is just, you're just going to be super stuck,
Yeah.
you know? And it's hard because a lot of us have been taught by our parents, by society, maybe by people we've dated. There is a lot of, I don't know. I know for me, I always grew up feeling like I had to be perfect or else I didn't deserve love. And perfect, not just in academic performance or, these other ways that you might have measured that, but like also that I could never make a mistake
Mm.
with like a loved one and then repair that relationship. And I do sense a lot of that in other people and in men in particular, because there is so much like self loathing, but an inability to process it and move past it because there's this sense that you just have to be doing the right thing all the time.
Hmm.
And if you're not, then you're just failing.
Yeah.
Right. And there's just like no space to be like, wait a minute, I'm a squishy human. Like, of course I'm going to fuck up. Like, it's okay. I can just go back. And that's another thing that in romantic relationships was always really difficult too, because it was like, okay, you fucked up. Like, let's just like work past it.
Hmm.
But it was like because that would bring up so much shame, we couldn't even talk about it to like work through it, and then nothing gets resolved, and then you like as the partner you feel really gaslit by the other person because you're like, I know this thing was not okay, and now you're kind of acting like it never happened,
Hmm.
instead of just like I can't tell you how many people I've said to, like, why can't we just talk about it? Like, why can't we just talk about it? Then we can move on and we don't need to talk about it anymore, and it's like, why do you keep bringing it up? And it's like, because we haven't actually fucking talked about it.
Mm.
And it causes a lot of, but I can see that the other person is also like, it's not like they feel okay. That's the sad part, is you can tell that the other person doesn't feel okay with it. It's not like they've actually moved on. They just can't look at it.
Hmm.
And
Yeah.
when you have a lot of corners of your heart that you can't look at or in your brain, it's not a good way to live.
Yeah. Yeah. I feel like that is a really good encapsulation of like what we're talking about with guys.
Mm-hmm.
I, I, there's so much going on inside, and there's like so
Yeah.
many mechanisms and controls. I think that it just feels such like a repressive system, like a very a repressive system that doesn't get talked about a lot. Like,
Mm-hmm.
and I remember at the beginning of this journey, I used to feel like, um, like how do you create a dialogue for guys that doesn't seem like it's like an MRA type movement, but is actually like talking about um, like how to make guys better.
Mm-hmm.
And it's really gotten me thinking a lot about like how for a group of people that tend to be privileged, like how do you create groups for privileged people to better themselves without it turning totally toxic.
Or turning into the KKK or something.
Yeah, exactly. And it's like I think
You're like, how do we get a bunch of privileged people in a room?
yeah, it's like
and
but at the same time it's like that's the people that need the most work and these type of
yes,
things. But like
yeah,
how do you facilitate that? It's such a struggle. I don't know.
yeah.
Um,
It's a really good question, honestly. It is, because I do feel like there's so many people who are trying to do this kind of work for men. And actually, Maureen, I know she's not on anymore, but she mentioned up thread. Have you seen Man Enough? It's a
mm,
like a web series. I think you'd really like it. It's a bunch of male actors who get together and just kind of have these sort of conversations about masculinity with one another and like how they've sort of worked through some things. And it's a really good series. I highly recommend it to
mm,
you and also to anyone else who hasn't seen it and is interested. Um, But yeah, it's hard because, I actually will follow that kind of work because I think it's interesting and I like to that's why I wanted to talk to you today because I really like hearing from men like their thoughts and their struggles and like how they've done this work. And so much of it still ends up being kind of centered around still reaffirming masculinity, right?
Mm-hmm.
Just trying to like redefine it. And it seems very I think the key is that you don't, right? Like, I think that's what Susie was getting at before, too, is like you just kind of lean into the fact that you are going to feminize yourself
Mm-hmm.
through this work and that there's nothing wrong with that,
Yep.
right? And however you want to define it, like that's how you will be defined, and that's okay. Instead of trying to still, like a real man
Mm-hmm.
cries, a real man, shares his feelings, and it's like, sure, but also maybe just a human does that, and
Yeah.
maybe like we should just be moving towards us all being well-rounded, healthy humans
Yeah.
instead of still defining ourselves as men while trying to do this work of like dismantling toxic masculinity.
Yep. Yeah, I think that's why that question was so difficult for me to answer, is because it's like
Mm-hmm.
I just don't like framing it within the realm of masculinity as a person who doesn't feel very masculine himself, even though I've learned a lot of those behaviors. I just like I don't see how that could possibly work. And every time I see like these like brotherhood retreats and stuff like that,
Oh
I'm just
God.
like, I don't think this is for me. I this just seems like you're doing this in a different way. Um,
Yeah.
no.
Yeah, and I don't fault people for
Hmm.
trying, but I do, to me, that's where I see I think where a lot of this work is failing is that it's still trying to assert a certain baseline where it's like, well, we should be blowing up the baseline. There should be no
Hmm.
baseline. Like you were saying, I think you put it beautifully, like we should all have access to all of these things all the time. And I feel like, yeah, a lot of this work doesn't do that.
Hmm.
And that's why I do like the Man Enough series because I feel like to me it has that vibe, like it's very soft. And I think in a way it's doing that work of like, yeah, this work is soft and like there's nothing wrong with that, you
Yeah.
know?
Yeah, I'll have to check that out for sure. I mean, it's such a struggle to find things like that, which is one of the
It
reasons I feel
is,
like
yeah.
things aren't moving as maybe briskly as we want. Uh,
Right.
oh,
Yeah,
um,
because I used to follow like the Good Man Project or Good
mm-hmm.
Men Project. I think you've brought that up. And it's like they had, I mean, who knows with my critical lens today, maybe it was never good, but I feel like I read some stuff from them that was good, but then they still just have so many things that I'm like, no,
Yeah.
this isn't changing anything.
I think a lot of it too, it feels very contrived. So it's like
So
like you're
contrived.
trying to like force a particular narrative or like a particular like atmosphere around something, and you're just
Yes.
like, oh, like I want to go in here and like be myself, not like this particular thing that you're creating.
Hmm. Yeah. Well, that's how I feel about a lot of feminist stuff too. It's like very contrived and has this very particular, yeah, like vibe to it that I'm like, no, I don't like I don't want to be in a vibe with you. I just want to like be empowered and like connect with other people.
Yeah.
Yeah. Um One thing that we haven't talked about yet that I want to make sure we get to is you have gotten kind of back into dating. Um I don't know if you were ever not dating, but you've been putting a lot of effort into it and trying to meet up with people. And you have been practicing establishing and asserting boundaries with people. And I
Mm.
feel like we never hear dudes talk about that ever. Boundaries feel like a burden of women sometimes. And I just thought it was really cool that you have been doing that work. So I would love for you to talk about like your process and even recognizing that boundaries were something you needed
Mm.
to have and work on, and then just sort of how has that been for you so far establishing those with people.
So is this like when we're talking about boundaries, are we talking about maybe like establishing how I feel about how the relationship is progressing and putting my own limitations on where that
I
relationship is
mean,
moving.
we can
But
talk about any kind of boundary because your girl loves a boundary. Um, but yeah, if you want to start off maybe with just dating and kind of exploring that space, and because I know that to me, that's been some of the bravest work that you've done is being really honest with people
Mhm.
about, yeah, like what you want and what you will and won't tolerate.
Yeah, so I mean, the what you want, that's a huge one. Not just
I know
going through
you
the
don't know.
motions, but
We
really
just
it's
had
like
a talk about that.
I think I have a really good idea, but I'm still like working on
Hmm.
um, um, like forming it together. Uh, but I think like knowing what you want and not just going through the motions is a huge thing. I think especially in dating, I know that like I was taught to like pursue, and if you don't
Hmm.
like when you don't get, then like you failed, which is like not how it should be at all. And then on top of that, also like having self-esteem in order to
Mm.
um, say say like no to things that don't feel like they're good, because if you feel like you just like really always want to um, be in a relationship with like that person once you start pursuing them, um, if you feel like it's the whole like coming across as slightly desperate. And I feel like it seems like the whole world around like dating sometimes is like one person just really strongly pursuing, and they should absolutely be pursuing the other person all the time. And like I hate it now that I recognize it. I think it's awful. Um, and
Yes.
I, there's nothing about it that's like good for anybody. Like
Nope.
if you feel something and you just express it, or like be a participant in the entire process of it. Like don't fulfill a role in it. And every time the roles are not fulfilled and people are just coming into the thing as themselves, like those are always the best relationships, and that's how they form. Whenever there's like these
Mm.
roles, then it always turns into like again this contrived relationship with contrived components, and it's awful. um so I think like approaching dating with a mindset of like, okay, what do I want out of a relationship? um it's weird that it took me this long to kind of ask myself that question. And then not only like what I want out of the relationship, but like how do um I always struggled with uh disappointing people.
Mm.
And so sometimes I would perpetuate something because I didn't want the other person to feel like I was letting them down. So I'm doing
Yeah.
that because that doesn't work for anybody, especially the other person. Um, and I think that's just kind of about like having the confidence, so you're not bringing those type of things into your dating experience, and then just being like, does it feel good when I'm with this person, and this is the kind of person that I want to be with. Um, s- I, a lot of my male friends, I don't feel like necessarily do that. Like they either go in like into everything half-hearted and half-assed,
Hmm.
or they go in like guns blazing, and then later on are like, all right, now that I've done the dating thing, now we're gonna see how I actually feel, but not consciously,
Right.
in a very like wait
Never
until
that.
the dam breaks kind of way. And I'm like, I don't know
Yeah.
why I'm in this relationship. And it's like maybe you should have thought about it earlier.
Right.
So, um, but that's not something like I wasn't. I think I was taught the opposite, from like a
Hmm.
dating perspective and from a media perspective, and it's just like pursue um, and gosh, to be honest, like half the time I feel like um, it's hard because it's very much still expected, those
Hmm.
type of things. Like
Yeah.
those traditional roles are still very much expected on both sides of the fence. And um, and so trying to like I you because people want a certain process with things, I feel like there's a lot of opportunity that's lost. And now that I feel like more confident in like being able to express what I want and just have a good time and be myself, which is such an amazing thing, um, I like I don't like to go through those motions. I just don't, and then it just gets really like the whole thing gets very frustrating to me.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Same.
yeah. Oh.
Yeah. Yeah, I just think it's sad how rare it is for a guy to think about these things, because that has been definitely my experience dating men, is that it's a lot about, I think because men are taught to, and obviously this is very like cishet, but I think because men are taught to objectify women, that even men who try to not fall into the worst of that, right? Like, you seem like someone who tries really, or maybe you don't even have to try, but I don't feel like you're like, I've never heard you be like, oh yeah, that piece of ass, you know. You're just
Well, you've
not
never
like
heard me
that.
say that, Nicole? You've never.
Even trying to say it for you was like very uncomfortable. um so so I think even the thing that happens, and it's funny because I actually did talk about this on the podcast episode I just did, is that like there's such you can objectify people in a lot of different ways, right? Like it can be sexually objectifying, which men are taught to do, but I think they're also taught to project a lot onto someone else without actually seeing who they are. And a lot of it is just sort of like, is this person aesthetically pleasing? Does this person have XYZ trait that I like? 90% of men want someone who's bubbly or happy or
Hmm.
positive or bouncy, or, you know, insert that. And I,
Hmm.
as a grumpy, flat, not bouncy person, have always been like, okay, cool. Um, but I just see that time and time again. Like, I see guys being like, oh my God, I'm like obsessed with this girl. And I'm like, why? And they're like, oh, because she's really pretty and she's like happy all the time.
Hmm.
Or they'll say things like, she never like fights with me. And to me, that's always like such a huge red flag, because I'm like, so you are into her because she doesn't challenge you at all,
Hmm.
and because she right now is presenting like a manic pixie dream girl where she never has any emotion besides happiness.
Hmm.
So you never have to have any emotion besides happiness. Do you
Hmm.
know what I mean? And then, like you were saying, then people get into a relationship, and I think for a lot of women too, they know this, so they play into that. Like, you're keenly aware that the other guy doesn't want you to have complicated emotions, right? You know that they just want you to be happy all the time and not have any problems. And that's like the cool girl trope that you fall into, where you're like, yeah, man, like I don't fucking care about anything. I'm so cool. Like all I want to do is play video games and have sex. And like I never have an issue with anything. But
That
then you
sounds
get into
horrible.
like, it's awful. I I like languished in that trap for years. It was so terrible. And then what of course ends up happening is you are a human with other feelings besides like perkiness, and you just fucking explode one day.
Yeah.
And then the guy's like, "Whoa, like you're crazy. Where did this come from?"
Hmm.
And then you like end up falling apart, or you end up fighting all the time or breaking up or whatever it is. So where was I going with all of that? I always start with the direction and then I lose it halfway through. Um,
I think it's really interesting because like both those things are just entering a relationship with false notions and like not
yes.
like not being
Yeah, well,
yourself.
everyone's performing, right?
Yeah.
I think that was the point, is like,
Yeah.
yeah, everyone's performing. And oh, yes. And I have noticed with guys, so I would have like guy friends and I would be like, well, like, what do you like what about her makes her a good partner for you though? And
Mm,
they'd be like, oh, she's fucking hot, what did I just say? You know what I mean? Or like even when they're like, oh, she's smart and she's this and she's that, and I'm like, okay, but like I could just tell that there was no analysis happening of like what does a long-term relationship take to be
yeah.
successful, and
Mm,
like what qualities fit into that. So I appreciate that you've been asking yourself so many questions lately, because like I've had so many guys who are like, I'm obsessed with you and like I love all these things about you, but I could tell from their behavior that that wasn't true.
mm,
Like the last person I dated was like, oh, I love that like you have so much passion and you have like these creative projects and you do all this stuff. And then one of the first things he did when we were dating is try to make me stop podcasting because I didn't have enough time for him.
mm,
So do you know what I'm saying? It's
mm,
like you just like the idea of a person who's, because he had just broken up with someone who is very dependent, I guess. You know, they had like a very kind of dependent relationship. So it's like you like the idea of someone who's independent,
mm.
but at the end of the day, you actually don't want that.
Yeah.
You want to take an independent person and make them dependent, and then that's going to make you feel good about yourself.
And then just like saying those things, it's like, okay, so if I say these things that make the other person feel good, like I'm
Mm-hmm.
there for you, I got your back, like it's almost like a process of like winning somebody.
Yeah.
It's not actually how you feel. You're just trying to like it's like an
Yeah.
ego trip, and it's like a safety net so that you can like have somebody there.
Yes.
Um and that's where it's like, okay, what do you like actually want? And then you also be like, okay, am I lying to myself about these type of things? Like, do I not actually know myself, and am I just going through these motions, and then realizing what those motions are, and then asking yourself like, hey, what do I really want myself in a relationship? Like, that's a hard thing to do, and it's like it's not as common as it should be. It really is not as common as it should
It
be.
really isn't. It really isn't. And I do think there is, you know, so many of the dating tips that I read when I was younger and still thought that anyone could give me dating tips was so much was focused around like prolonging that sense of chase for the
Hmm.
guy. Because
Hmm.
I do think that there is some validity to it, but obviously not to get into like a real relationship, like what I would consider like a real relationship.
Hmm.
You can get people to continue to feel like so enamored with you by prolonging that sense of chase, but like what are you doing? Like you're
Hmm.
not actually building anything with that, right? You're both playing a role that you've been taught to play and enjoy, but you're not actually like connecting in a way that's going to lead to something lasting.
Hmm.
Or
Yeah.
you both have to play those roles forever.
Yeah.
There are people who do that and they're happy somehow with that. I don't understand it myself,
Yeah. I'm in the same
but
boat as
yeah.
you. I don't like, it's like
I
when I see
hate
that,
it.
I'm like, oh, I don't want to do that. Like, I just want to be myself
Yeah.
and honest all the time and not play these roles for the rest of my life. So I totally understand
Exactly.
that. Yeah.
Yeah, it's exhausting. But
Mm.
I think that happens because of everything that you were just talking about, is that I think a lot of guys don't know what they're supposed to look for or to do any of the work of like, it's just interesting because I think it's interesting to think about like men being the ones that actually don't really have boundaries
Mhm.
or what's the qualifications for themselves,
Mm.
because they haven't been taught that they should and that they can. And so lacking that, what are you going to get caught up in? Well, you're going to get caught up in the chase, and you're always going to be chasing a new relationship because your relationships don't, like, they aren't fun after a little while,
Mm.
because you both start being actual messy humans,
Yeah.
right? And the artifice falls away, and then yeah, and then you just talk to people and they're like, oh, relationships suck. And you know, it's just like you always meet someone and they're great and then blah, and I'm like, well, are they great, or are you just attracted to them and caught up in the newness, and then like
Yeah.
then you're actually seeing them. Because I've had guy friends where I'm like, what do you, this girl is so bad for you. Like, what, she's not into anything you're into, like XYZ. And they just be like, no, she's great. And then like 3 months later, it's like, oh yeah, she sucks, like XYZ thing. And I'm like, yeah, dude, it was there the whole time. You just
Yeah.
didn't see it.
And it's like it's that gamification of it. It's like that need to like be in a relationship and need
Mm-hmm.
to go through those motions to like do the thing and not just sitting down and like
Yes.
it's like does this person work for me for what I'm trying to do with myself in my life?
Yeah.
Oh, without
I
being
know
too
married
strict. Yeah.
people who like don't even seem to like each other.
Hmm.
You know, like I can't tell you how I'm such a good third wheel. Just putting it out there to everyone, I'm a great third wheel. I'm so fun to have around. But I've been a third wheel many times to married couples, and I just mean like hanging out. I don't mean sexually, although call me. But we've been like hanging out, and it just is like wild to me. Like the husband, for instance, will start talking about his job, and then the wife will be like, you know, I hate it when you talk about work. And I'll just be like, whoa. Like,
Yeah.
how are you married and that's how you engage with each other, you
Yeah.
know?
I don't
Blows
know.
my mind.
You're asking the wrong person
I
on
know.
that one because it's like, nah, it's not what I'm looking for at all. I don't think it's what anybody's looking for. It's just like, sometimes I wonder too, like, how do you prevent that? Um,
Hmm.
oh, and it's something I think about a lot. It's like, how do you
Me
create
too.
these long lasting relationships that don't have to be like, happy, joyous all the time, but that are like, they give enough flexibility to allow people to be themselves. I really feel like I know this is like a really common thing, but like admiration is a big thing, and more
Hmm.
than I thought it was before. Like admiring the way that somebody does things, not what they do necessarily, but the way they go about doing things.
Hmm.
Um,
Yeah.
oh, but I'm still a little baby at these relationship things too.
Aw.
I'm a I'm
Just
a
a
I'm a
wee
young late
little 6 foot
30s.
four baby.
Yeah. I'm only a third of the way through this trip.
Isn't
I'm,
that wild? It's
yeah.
like, yeah.
I mean,
I
medicine's gonna make me live to 120, so
Thank you. I'm
yeah.
always saying that. Ask them. I'm like, I'm living to 140. I'm not going to be middle aged till I'm 70. Deal with it.
Yep.
Um, yeah, it's it's something I think about a lot too. I feel like I just need someone who's like really I can't decide if I need someone who's very untarnished by life or someone who's very tarnished by life.
Hmm.
If that makes sense.
Dude, a hundred percent. It's like you're clean and you had it like just you just navigated, you got like lucky
Yeah.
with like this kind of purity of goodness, or you're like a broken hunk of junk and like you're just cut like zip ties and duct tape, but you did the work. You're still on the road, baby. Like
Yeah. I think my soulmate's gonna be like Sarah Connor from like Terminator
oh
2
my
or something.
gosh. What stage
Or
of her
I'm gonna be
journey?
Sarah Connor. Oh,
'Cause
who knows?
she would have been like a rough person to date in the middle of that whole thing.
Yeah.
Oh.
But it's like also, I get you.
Oh no, I get her, but I don't know, like right out of the insane asylum that they stuck her into that she shouldn't have been.
you know, we'll
Oh.
see. If she feels like she can be on an app at that point, on the
Oh
apps,
my God, could you imagine swiping on an app and then Sarah Connor
what would
popped
her
up?
profile picture be?
I mean, it has to be where like she's like in the insane asylum and she's got like the
Oh,
little white top on and then she's
yeah.
like super jacked and
Yes, please.
uh,
Well, do you have anything else or should we move into the after party?
um yeah, I don't have anything particular
I
except
think that
like
was all of my questions for you.
oh, except thank you for like putting letting me like uh uh come on here and like I always feel like when I talk about this stuff it's like it's a challenge because I don't feel like I know a lot and sometimes I feel like I'm making all sorts of mistakes, and I like um I'm just like putting it out there that like I love being corrected. And I feel like my view is so small and so limited all the time that I just love like um please engage me in any way at any time about like with growth or changing my opinion or my mind. I love it. I love these talks. I remember recently we were talking about something and you said I totally disagree, and we didn't get to continue on that branch of conversation, but I remember like I was like, oh, excellent, excellent, please, like I'd love like just like let's go at it. So um
I'm
like
sure my listeners will be shocked to hear that I would say something so blunt. No, and you have been asserting that a lot lately in our conversations of like, I feel like you've been like really reinforcing, like, no, I really want you, and you've been checking in a lot too, and just really reinforcing, like, I really want you to tell me if something's wrong. I want you to tell me if just if something's off. Like, it doesn't even have to be that like you did something wrong, but even just like if things are off, I want to know. Like, if I did something wrong, I want to know. And I just have to say, I like really, really appreciate that a lot, because I feel like I'm very intense, and I feel like I tend to censor myself a lot around people, and it's nice to feel like I could, like, even when I said that, like, I totally disagree, then later I was like, oh fuck, that was probably like too aggressive and I
mhm.
shouldn't have said it that way. And I just really like, it really like warms my heart that like you're making space for me to be more fully my bitchy, beautiful self in our friendship, and be
I
able to
love
show
it.
up in those ways, because
Oh, I love
I
it.
can be very blunt, and it's something I've learned that like other people don't like, but it is a part of me, and so to feel like I can show up that way with you is really cool.
Yeah, don't ever censor yourself with me. I like if anything was ever like too much, I'd be like, Nicole, we need to sit down and talk for a little while, okay?
You would say it that way too, like, Nicole, okay,
Oh,
Saturn system says.
yeah.
It's an inside joke, no one gets it.
So many.
Oh God, yeah. So many inside jokes. All right, well, friend, this was a wonderful conversation. This was so cool. So to do this with you, I'll save some of this for the after party. But thank you for coming on. I really appreciate it. To everyone who's listening, reminder that my podcast is out now. Pink Spots, it's its own thing. And next week's, or it's going to be every 2 weeks that it's going to be published. And the next one, Everett, our resident diva, did an episode with me where we answer, am I still straight if I date a trans person? And I think we took a very nuanced, wonderful journey through gender and what the fuck this all even means anyway. So check that out if you want to. And if you don't, then fine. If you like this video, subscribe, like, share, do all the things, and we will see you in 2 weeks. Bye-bye. So I'm going to play the video. You're going to have 3 minutes to go potty or do whatever you want to do. I'm not going to police your actions. And then we'll be back, and we'll get to hang out with everyone. Okay? See you in 3 minutes. We're back. Hello, children. So, kids, this is your one of two, because Sarah's going to come on the show, my other bestie, either next month or the month after. We haven't scheduled it yet. But this is your opportunity to ask one of my friends anything you ever wanted to know about me.
Let's spill all the beans.
Yeah. You can tell them what color my huggle is, if I'm a good or bad loser,
Ooh,
what games I'm good at.
You're good at all the games.
I'm all right.
I don't know if
do
you're
all
a good
right.
or bad loser or not, actually.
I'm both, I think. I honestly don't mind losing. It's just that if I feel like I fucked up, then I get really upset. I don't get upset at other people. I get mad at myself. But I know that's still not enjoyable for other people, so it's something I'm working on. To be like, hey man, it's fine. It's fine that I consistently lose to Christian by 1 or 2 points.
Oh my god, that happened like 3 times. You literally won like 75% of the games.
Yeah, so I'm trying to be, because honestly, genuinely, what I like the most about playing games is just the playing of them and the strategy and the, like, I always like a new challenge. Like, you know how I've been talking about how for some reason with Venus, I just always, when we have Venus in the mix, it like, I just don't do as well. And I'm like, okay, well, that's a new challenge. Like, I want to do well more consistently with that expansion.
But you still hate it.
But I fucking hate it, and I don't know why. I don't know why I hate it so much. It's just like, what are these floaters? What is this fucking thing over here? I don't know why, but it just feels like extra.
It totally
whereas
is.
the other stuff doesn't feel that way.
Yeah. Like this is like a trailer on the back of like the big car. It's like it just feels tacked on. It totally does.
Well, I'm really glad you agree with me because I think I didn't realize. I think I have just always bitched about it so much. I didn't know how you or Sarah felt about it. So I was like, oh, okay. I'm glad you feel that way too. I do hate it. But I didn't want to say it too much because we had the.
You didn't have to, Nicole. Don't worry. It was very, very apparent.
I don't know what you're talking about. I'm very discreet with my feelings and expressions. Thank you. Yeah, but I was trying not to be too much of a little pill about it because what were we going to do? It was already mixed into all the stuff.
Yeah.
You know? But now that we can take it out, yeah, I fucking hate it. And I don't know why. It's really not, I don't know why I hate it. Anyway.
If you would have asked me to like take the cards out of the game when we had the physical game, I would have gone like, I would have literally looked at you like this and I would have been like, 1, 2,
yes.
3.
Oh, geez, and I wonder why I didn't ask you to do it, you weirdo. So Koch Potato says, have you tasted Nick's soup? You may not know this about me. I don't know if you know how much I love soup.
I know
Do you know this about me?
But I don't know which, I don't know which.
You've had my chili, which is how we got into the whole.
Don't say it.
I'm going to practice good consent and I won't say it.
You can say it.
Beefy corn dippers. Because Sprouts used to have the best corn chips ever, and of course they've discontinued them because Sprouts discontinues anything that brings me joy. It's like the anti-Marie Kondo store for me. And they had these big, chunky, sturdy corn dippers, and I would make very beefy chili with Beyond Burger and chorizo and beans for some fiber. And yeah, I made that, and then I would call them beefy corn dippers because they were beefy and we were using them in our beefy chili. Well, okay, but just for the record, that's how I feel about liquidy terms
Hmm.
and the word juicy.
I know there's so many times that like because I know certain things that you're like, about, and I won't say them right now, but
Mm-hmm. You can if you want to. I think it's kind of fun.
my favorite one when it was I talked about stepping on an avocado with your bare foot.
Christian, I did not know that that's what you're going to say. Ugh. I hate food stuff so much. Even to the point where so I put coconut oil in my hair before I bleach it to like help protect it. And like even that the whole time I'm like ugh, ugh, like I'm just like I hate it so much.
We all have our
uh,
things.
weren't you also talking about that? Like that was something you wanted to do?
I only said it because I knew you get a
You little
reaction out of you.
rascal.
Okay, Miss Beefy Corn Dipper.
Listen, it's different when I do it. Everyone knows that. Keck asks, "Ooh, are you playing any board games?" So yes, the board game we've been talking about is Terraforming Mars, which y'all have heard me talk about a million times because I'm obsessed. How many years have we been playing that game, and I still like cannot get enough of it,
Like since the first day it came out, which
which is
four
wild.
4 years now maybe.
Jeez,
I think it's yeah.
dang, yeah, I cannot get enough of that game. Even though it's literally a game about everything I'm against, which is like space colonization. Um, but it's such a good game.
Hmm.
And now we've been playing virtually through the tabletop simulator on Steam. And I had been resistant because I thought I was going to hate it. And oh my God, y'all, it is the fucking best. There's scripts, like the one that we play has all these scripts. So, like, so much of the tedious stuff you had to do before is animated or automated. I mean, I guess it's also technically animated. Um, and you can pick and choose what expansions to put in. So, like we were saying, I fucking hate Venus, the Venus expansion. But before we had the physical board and all the cards and everything was all mixed together, so it wasn't like we could just take it in or out. But now we can. It's amazing.
It's really amazing.
And we hang out through Discord and we do video chat, and like we've been amazed at how much we really feel like we're hanging out. Like it feels almost like we're in the same room again, which has been really nice. Okay, so Koch is now goading you on and asking, stepping on a whole unpeeled avocado or stepping on one cut in half, the pit exposed?
So it's more like stepping on guac.
Oh God. Does it have like salsa in it? Or like seasoning? Is it just
Unsure.
smushed or is it like seasoned guac?
It's like just has to be smushy.
Oh my God.
It can't be like a firm
You're a
avocado.
monster.
I try my best.
Huh? Oh my God. And then we've also been playing Everdell. I said it, I'm saying that right now, right?
Yes,
Because I used to say Everdale.
which sounds so much better.
Doesn't it?
It
It's
does.
work to say it the right way, which to me means that it's wrong. So in my head, it is Everdale, but we've been playing Everdell. And then what was that one game we just tried for the first time?
Oh, Robinson Crusoe? That one?
Yes.
Robinson
Yes.
Crusoe. I always say Caruso, but it's Crusoe.
Yes. Yeah. And that one I didn't love, but I'm excited by the other variations of it. I think
Hmm.
that will make it more interesting.
It was
Because I
a very
really do.
heavy game.
Yeah, it was very heavy. Um, I didn't hate it. I wasn't like obsessed with it.
Hmm.
But I'm excited to try some of the variations. I'm a big sucker for games that have like scenarios or just different kind of encapsulated situations that you can play. Because to me, that makes it like new and exciting and like a challenge.
Hmm.
So I do like that aspect of it.
Yeah, one of your Um, I see somebody's been playing Gloomhaven
I
recently.
know. I was just going to pull that up. Yes. So, Keck, a couple of friends. So, what do you think about it? What do you think about Gloomhaven? We have started. We've talked about playing Gloomhaven for a while now.
Hmm.
And are we going to do it though?
Yeah, I don't know. It's such a monster, and our schedules make it really challenging to
I
like have a
know.
campaign. So
Could we do once a week? Could we do that?
I could.
I could.
Yeah.
Where's Sarah?
Hmm. It's a great question. There should be a children's book with that name.
Oh, I would read that book.
I would too.
Sarah and I should write that book. And it'd be like, I'm right here.
Yeah.
And every page is her just popping up somewhere random, being like,
Or
I'm right here.
every page is just blank except for her. It just says, I'm right here. It's like a 300-page book of just that.
Oh my God. I feel like this is $1 million idea. We should do it. Keck, do you know about the, Andy was just telling us about there's some new Gloomhaven game, and I cannot remember the name of it, but apparently it's like less involved, and even though it came out, it's like newer. He says it's actually a good thing to do before you get into the full game. Do you know what I'm talking about? Because we've talked about maybe doing that, because that would be a little bit more accessible.
Hmm.
Dude, I just want to play a legacy game again
Hmm.
with a
There's so
story.
many.
With a story. A
Yeah.
good story.
Yeah, I'm a sucker for a good narrative. I think that's one of the reasons I like the legacy games too, is I love a good strong narrative.
Me too.
I
I
think
miss
that
it.
Time Stories is like that. That's a
I want
very
to try
cool.
that.
Yeah, it seems really cool. I've heard some good things about it.
Danny, I don't know if you're asking everyone. We have a few shared playlists floating around. I think in the Discord. And then, yes, Christian, Sarah, and I just revamped an old playlist that we had where I've been really negligent with it actually because I've been so buried in work. But we, like, every 2 weeks, I'll clear it out. And then we all just put in like between 1 and 3 songs that we're listening to at the time. So it's kind of fun because we get to share like whatever is obsessing us at the moment. And then we get to like share new music all the time without it being super overwhelming. It's really fun.
I gotta be careful sometimes of what I put into that playlist
Why?
because if I
Why'd you
put
say
it,
that so weird?
so last night I listened to that Paul Simon song. See, exactly.
Christian, I should have known. I should have known.
Oh, I like some weird
You,
stuff.
yeah, you do.
Yeah.
Sometimes I'll be like, Christian, like I'll be talking about something and I'm like, Christian, I think you'd like it. And he's always like, what does that mean?
Yeah.
It's like, is that an insult or?
It's like how far left field does it have to be for you to say that?
Right. I can't remember what I said about that last, but it made me laugh. I was like, Christian, you'd be into this.
It should be like a whole like a list, like a whole Google
I
Sheet
know.
tag with
That would
that.
actually be. I'm going to start an Evernote for that. That would be really fun.
I think I started one of things that you and Sarah say that are funny, but I haven't done it in a
Aw.
while. Oh,
Is it called like twinsy quotes?
it should be. I love when you guys have your like little shared mannerisms. It brings me joy.
We were somehow separated in the womb, but from different moms
And different dads.
and different dads.
Just don't know
Yeah.
how that happened.
Keck says we've only played once so far, and I was just nerding out all over all the details and all the stuff. Everyone gets a little personal box with their character stuff. Dude, we have to play this game. We have to listen. Like, Sarah's gonna have kids at some point. We need to suck up all of her time right
Mm.
now before she has children, and then we have to like share her with children.
Or we could just teach the infants how to play.
Yeah, I'm so glad that Clay also is a gamer because it lets me know that they will like prioritize games in their life even after they have kids.
Yep.
I mean, we'll probably have to give them a couple months off, but after that, yeah, like put that baby on your lap and we'll teach it how to play. Any child of mine is going to be a gamer child. And Keck said, I don't know, but we were able to do some quick rounds and finish them once we all got past intro. Hi, Mexi. People are talking about playlists. Yeah. I told you, but I haven't told the kids yet. I've been rewatching the Star Trek Next Gen and watching, obviously starting with season 1, and it's been a wild ride. I just watched the 9th episode where Q comes back for the first time and puts them on that planet with the soldiers who are like creatures, and then gives Riker his powers.
Oh, yeah.
Dude, that episode is so fucking ridiculous. Like, there's so many amazing moments from that episode
Like
that you could just pluck out. Just things I had to laugh at. Like, there's this one part where Worf is like standing and then Q had appeared, but they like, it's the editing on the first season is so strange. So they cut to Worf and he's just kind of like standing, and then he's like, ugh, and he like runs forward and he jumps over the thing on the bridge, the railing, but he kind of like trips a little bit, but they left it in.
Gotta watch this now. I love stuff like that.
I swear, if you just want to have a good time, just watch episode 9. There's so many great moments. Especially Worf moments. They're also with Q down on the planet, and he gives everyone like whatever drink, like beverage that they want. So they all have cups like appear in their hands and it has like their favorite beverage in it. And Worf just looks at him dead in the eye and just pours the beverage out. And he's like, and then he was like, oh yes, Klingons don't drink with their enemies. And he's just like mean mugging him the whole time.
I love that.
It's so good.
He's such a great character.
Oh, it's so good. Yeah, no serious spoilers. Mexi says, yes, my children will be gamer children as well. Yeah.
Good call.
Alex asks, how does everyone keep positive and happy while consuming negative leftist media? Sounds like Nick and Christian lean on good escapism via games. I'm recovering from depression, so no enjoying anything. Ugh, that's so hard. It's so hard to be in a depressive state because, yeah, I feel like for me, and this might be tied into autism, but I have so many special interests or hobbies that I just never get sick of, that I feel like I can lean on those pretty heavily. But like times that I've been depressed and just nothing is fun, this is dark times.
Yeah, I think video games for my period, and that's usually what I would do. Also, I mean, for me, I feel really lucky that I got into this early, but running was an amazing way to deal with it, because even when I was like miserable, when I'd go for a run, you can't stop the dopamine from serotonin or whatever one of the chemicals it is from running. Like it comes no matter what. So that was.
I feel like that'd be the title of an amazing song. Can't stop the dopamine. And it'd be a song about like being depressed but still loving this one thing.
Oh, which style? Which band would it be?
I'm feeling like, well, I'm really into kind of I don't even know what to call it. It's like electronic pop music. Kind of like this I'm sure there's got to be some name for the genre, but kind of like this, like Charlie XCX or like this sort of poppy, but very like electronic sort of music.
I think I have a request for you to add that into our shared playlist because I don't know that.
Oh,
Hmm.
I would love to.
Hmm.
I'll have to make a note so I don't forget. But I could also see it being more like a pop punk sort of situation. Charlie XCX to playlist. I need to actually listen to the playlist. I've been a bad bunny with that. I have this new song that when I go for a walk, I listen to it at least 6 times in a row.
Hmm.
So I'll have to put that on there.
Those are great. I love when you find a song that speaks to you like that.
Yes. Oh, shit. And yes, Mexi has a whole channel called Positive Leftist News. If you're not already watching and following, that's been amazing because it's really good to counteract all the negative news out there. And then I also like puzzles quite a bit.
Hmm.
Latasha's watching anime. I know Mohira, who hasn't been able to be around because of her really intense school schedule, she's also been watching a lot of anime. I've been trying to get back into it, but I haven't found anything yet that's really like pulled me in.
I watched an older anime recently,
Which one?
Planetes.
I don't think I know that one.
It's just about like a group of people who, in the near future, have to pick up space junk in Earth's orbit, and it's just kind of like an interesting, fun, kind of more like slightly more mature
Mm.
uh, anime. It was really nice.
I like the
Uh,
more mature anime, typically is more my style.
yep.
Do you recommend it, and where did you watch it?
I do recommend it. I think it's probably like on like Crunchyroll or something. It was really popular. I did not watch it there. Um,
Did you get it from Jack Sparrow's ship?
what?
Wink. Jack Sparrow? Do you know? You don't even know pop culture. You probably
I'm
don't know what I'm talking
yeah,
about.
I'm the worst person to like, write any of that kind of stuff.
Forget it.
I'm like, what's a
It's just
Breaking
it's
Bad?
just what the That's what the kids say when they're getting media from certain sources.
Oh,
Yeah, yeah,
I get
yeah.
it now.
Mhm, mhm,
Hmm.
mhm.
Hmm.
Planetes. How do you
It's
spell
good.
it?
It's like planets with an E before the S.
Okay, I'll look that up
Okay.
because I need something.
There's another one too. It has a million different names, but I actually watched it because I found it very soothing and slow. Um, it was gr- originally a manga, and it's older as well. It's called Cafe Alpha,
Hmm, I haven't heard of
and
that either.
it's really, really peaceful. I recommend the manga too because it's just like got some beautiful shots, beautiful artwork, and it's just this really slow slice of life. Um,
Hmm.
nice. So if you're looking for something that kind of feels calming and not stressful, or not like you don't like want a lot of energy out of something, but you like something that's kind of slow and peaceful, I highly recommend it.
I haven't watched I think it's called Princess Moon. Is that right? But it's an animated film on Netflix.
Hmm.
Oh, Over the Moon. That's what it's called. But that's supposed to be really good. I think it's a bit sad, so maybe it wouldn't. I'm a weirdo. I just like watching really sad or intense things all the
Hmm.
time. So maybe that wouldn't be a good one. But yeah, I've heard it's really beautiful, like very good.
Hmm. I know sometimes when I'm feeling kind of down, like watching a self movie can help. Like something
Hmm.
that's like sad but still has like ending that's like
Yeah,
uplifting.
yeah,
Um, it can help because it kind of like shakes you out of that lack of emotional state.
yeah.
Um, So there's like hope and there's sadness, and it's just like a good way to shake it up. That worked for me at least, and the kind of stuff that I was dealing with.
Yeah. Sometimes I just like bawling my eyes out at something that isn't my own life.
Yep. Yep.
As dark of a statement as that is. Yeah. So yeah, I often, it's hard for me recommending stuff to people who want like happy things because I'm like, I don't know, I watch so much depressing shit.
Hmm.
All right, kids. Well, it's been fun hanging out. Are you daddy or are you uncle? I haven't decided yet because I'm mommy around here. I'm not really mommy, I'm a mother. I'm the mother.
Hmm.
Yes. Keep the children in control. Okay, no, Danny, see, they always do this. I try to end and then they say something and I'm like, I have to talk about this. FLCL, like, I literally have never met anyone else who's talked about that. Yes, it's so good. And I want to rewatch it because I watched it a million years ago.
Is that Fooly Cooly?
Fooly Cooly,
Yeah.
yes. How have we not talked about this?
Yeah, I remember watching that.
Yeah, I want to rewatch that. Okay. Yeah, avuncular vibes from Christian for sure. Christian, you have such like good dad energy. You have the best dad laugh. Have I ever told you this?
No.
Your laugh when you laugh is like a dad's laugh. And I just always think like you should have a child on your lap right now because it was such a like dad thing. You're always like, like I can't even do it. But it's like such a like just a warm, lovely like dad laugh.
Oh, thank
Anyway,
you.
it's wonderful.
Hmm.
Yeah, so you get to be Uncle Christian or something to the kids. But this was super fun. Thank you for coming on. Christian has to go get his second vaccination. I know,
Yay.
which is good.
Hmm.
I need to get my first. I need to get any vaccination. I've been so scared of the getting sick.
Mm.
I'm just like, I'm gonna have to do it, you know, but I'm just like really not looking forward to that at all. Did you tell me how you felt after the first one? Were you fine?
I was like maybe like 5-10% less energy. My arm was sore, but usually the first one is like it's almost
Not a
nothing.
big
But
deal.
it's the second one that really like knocks you out for just one day.
Yeah.
Oh, well,
Yeah.
if you need some OJ and some food delivered, I will deliver them
Some
to you.
crackers.
Yeah.
Yeah. Christian's such a good friend. He's anytime I actually do ask for help, he's so enthusiastic that it just makes me feel like wonderful. Like I feel like I can actually ask you for things,
Good.
which is
I like
hard
when
for
you
me.
do.
Yeah. Christian actually helped me with my uh big cataclysmic event that kicked off the need for this platform, if you know what I'm talking about. Um, but yeah, during my split from my former business partner, I was like, oh, this is way too much to ask of anybody. Like, I can't ask him this. This is going to be so ridiculous. And it was something that Sarah normally would have done for me, but she had moved by then. Anyway, so I asked Christian to help me out in this way, and he just wrote back, he's like, I would love to do that for you. And I was like, aw, okay, we're good.
Yep.
It was very,
Anytime.
very nice moment for me.
Hmm.
Yeah.
I'm
But
glad you
yeah,
asked.
pretty soon you're going to be fully inoculated. How exciting. Is it still 6 weeks after the second one? Because I heard it's like 6 weeks to be actually immune. Do you know?
I haven't like heard anything. Like I haven't like looked it up enough to know because I'm probably gonna still behave relatively similar. So I'm not like
Right.
putting anybody who's out there in the world at risk. Um, so
It's
yeah, I'm not
wild they
sure.
don't tell you because I feel like they're not telling people who are getting vaccinated like what the deal is.
Hmm.
Like I've noticed on my walks now, so few people are wearing masks,
Hmm.
and I wonder if it's, you know, I just feel like everyone's kind of over it, and it's like, well, it's still here.
I did listen to one podcast that talked about how people and during the Spanish flu got over it,
Mhm.
and then it had
And
a
then they
little
got,
second re-emergence of it, but they didn't have like the vaccine back then,
yeah.
so it's a bit different. So it'll be interesting. I've already like I went on this crazy journey this past week,
You
and
did.
it's really wild. Salt Lake City is kind of cool, um, but where was I going with that? Oh, it's already like back on the road a little bit, just driving around, and I was seeing a lot of semblances of normalcy
Mhm.
come back into the big cities, and it's really weird. And there's a lot of things that I hope um, that we've gained from this experience that we maintain and we don't lose as we kind of move back towards it.
Yeah.
But it's also going to be really nice to move back towards it. And also
Yeah.
selfishly, as a person who can be very introverted, it's been some nice in some ways like that. I don't have to,
Same.
I don't have to feel guilty about not going out every day and experiencing the
Yeah.
sun or something.
Oh my
Uh,
God. Yeah, it's so true.
yeah.
Um, yeah, I was thinking about that because I was like, all of us are going to have all these masks, right? And like that's been kind of normalized. And it just would be really nice if, like, during flu season, we all wear masks so I don't have to be so fucking terrified of getting the flu and
Hmm.
then getting pneumonia or bronchitis or whatever. Um, I don't see that happening, but I was like, but you know what? Maybe I'll still wear a mask at
Hmm.
least, and like it's only going to protect you so much, but it
Yeah, I hope it gets normalized, mask wearing, because
would be nice.
when I lived in Korea, it's totally a normal thing to do
Yeah.
over there, and over here it's seen as like it was like weird. It's like, why is that person wearing a mask? Like, what's wrong with them? But I'm hoping
Yeah.
now that like it becomes normalized because it's a really smart thing to do at times.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, all right. Don't leave the studio because I'd like to chat with you privately for a few minutes. You're in trouble.
An
Just kidding.
exclusive session.
Yeah. Yes, I guess I will allow you access to me for like 10 minutes. Since we're not going to get to hang out today like we had planned.
Hmm.
But yeah, I just want to thank everyone for tuning in. I want to thank Christian for coming on. He may start a very obscure, weird podcast at some point, and if he does, I will promote it here because it sounds really cool.
Thank you.
Yeah, and I would love to have you back anytime you want to talk about anything.
Awesome. I'm like
Yeah.
super thank you so much, and I'd be happy to come back anytime.
Aw. All right, kiddos, we'll see you. We'll be back in 2 weeks. I know I took 3 weeks off this time, but it was to get the live stream schedule in sync with book club schedule. So if you want to join the book club, you can join the Discord channel, link below. But yeah, we'll see you in 2 weeks. And oh, we'll be doing a sex stream, me, Mexi, and Catherine, and we'll be talking about bad sex versus sexual trauma or assault, which I have been teasing for years at this point. I'm gonna finally do it, finally cover that topic. So tune in for that. All right, bye everyone.